Let's now be formally introduced to the period style Romanticism. I've given you some rough ideas of the dates between the late 18th century to the mid 19th century. I give you this really non-specific timeline because art historians, we love to argue, and some argue that Romanticism as a period style can be seen way back into the 1750s and only coming fully to the front in the late 1700s or late 18th century. It goes against the rationality and thought and reason and logic of neoclassicism. Instead, similar to what we saw when we were learning about Rousseau in the Enlightenment, Romanticism is about the purity of emotion and this desire for freedom or freedom to feel passion, to understand one's own mind without the heavy influence of society. Very different from neoclassicism, right? So this freedom of thought, this freedom of feelings, freedom of action, it's something that has its roots in elements of the Enlightenment and in complete opposite of neoclassicism. Where neoclassicism was about reason, Romanticism is about passion. Where neoclassic was about thought, Romanticism is about feeling. When neoclassicism was about calculation, Romanticism is about intuition. And there's this increase during the Romantic period that embraces the illogical, the terrible, the frightening. We start to see subject matter that we've never seen before, like ghouls and goblins and horror and nightmares. We'll be looking at a lot of that, but let me first define Romanticism, because you know I love to. I emphasize here Roman. I highlight it in yellow. R-O-M-A-N. Roman? Like the ancient Romans? But Miss Cortez, that sounds like neoclassicism. I know, it's not. Roman, meaning the ancient Roman literature and poetry and songs that they were reading that was full of emotion. In fact, the word romantic means that you are full of passion and emotion. Not necessarily love, sexy time, but just a feeling of intuition. And you ignore reason, you ignore logic. So Romanticism, the root coming from the literature and poetry and song that they were reading that was so full of emotion. How does this translate to art? We start to see images that rather than proclaiming the greatness of the past, the neoclassical world would have done that, right? Instead, the Romantics will emphasize the fall or the failure or the hope of something grand and big and the uncontrollable way that time moves and the beauty in the danger, the beauty in the fear. Like this here, this is a watercolor sketch of two ancient Greek temples and their ruins. And we see the vastness of the sky, this heavy black storm brewing above. We can almost feel the cold winds rising. In terms of Romanticism, it's supposed to be there to help you feel the terrible and frightening force of nature, of God over the human world. And here, even the greatness of the Greeks cannot survive. Time, empires fall, kings die. All that remains is the everlasting time and power of God and nature. You hear it in my voice? I'm trying to emphasize here this kind of, we are so small, we are so puny, we are so powerless. We try to understand the world, and yet the world will always prevail over us. Romanticism also is going to give us these kinds of scenes. This here is titled, where is it? The Arab Horsemen Reclaiming Their Dead. Ooh. So we get a little bit of Orientalism, right? Here we are in Arabia. This painting here is really just a European almost like Disneyland view of Arabian costumes. It's very generic. But what we see is there's been a battle in the Arabian deserts, and these majestic, beautiful, strong men have been slain. Look at their dramatic postures of their bodies so that we can see the gorgeous strength that has been taken. Their life seeps out of their bodies. We can hear the horses neighing as they cart away the dead. Oh, what a horrible war this must have been. What a frightful sight. We see in Romanticism lots of ruins of structures. This is another watercolor. In this watercolor, we're seeing the ruins of a Gothic church. And the idea here isn't to proclaim the power of the Gothic world or the Gothic style. Instead, it's supposed to be, oh, look at man. We try to make these majestic temples and churches, and yet they fall, they crumble. Civilizations will always crumble under the weight of time. And yet, look how majestic it stands, these two walls. During the Romantic period, rich people will intentionally build ruins on their property. So like, let's say you have like a really cool house in the countryside, and you're like, right on that hill, I love like an ancient Greek temple, but like falling apart. And they go out in there and put it. So these kinds of ruins are in architecture and in paintings. And again, the idea is like, oh, the majesty of the old world, what it would have been like to live there and how it crumbled, it fell. Oh, there's beauty in its collapse. You see, it's not logical. It's illogical. It's not about ration. It's about passion. It's about feeling. I also told you that in subject matter, we're going to see stuff like ghouls and nightmares. This one here, the title is The Shepherd's Dream. And so we see this young man who's fallen asleep. His dog watches as these specters start to writhe above him. Ooh, this is crazy. We've never seen nightmares before. This is illogical. This is about fear. This is about kind of chilling you to the bone. And this is what the Romantic period is all about. They love this kind of pure emotion. Instead of telling you, the Romantics want you just to absorb it and to feel it. Whatever comes, however you react to the image, that is the purity of the artwork. So rather than you think this, you do this, like Neoclassicism, like Oath of the Harati, you die for your king, like they did. Instead, with Romantic, you're supposed to just, be overwhelmed and I can't think straight. That kind of pure emotion. Okay, let's look at our next artwork by the Romantic artists.